Hi there, I'm Hawke Robinson with RPGresearch.com, and many thanks to everyone for your comments regarding the segments on the D&D 5th edition series so far, and on the first segment of the Tomb of Horrors using 5th edition rules, but in the 1st edition Tomb of Horrors. This is continuing that segment, although there's a lot of overlap between the two since they're both regarding 5th edition. Please pardon my shaggy appearance. I was helping my son today build the floor to his treehouse. It's kind of actually more of a tower. It's up on 4 stilts, cemented in a couple of feet of cement on 10-foot 4x4s. It's about 11 foot by 10 foot, and it's going to be at least a full story. So it's a story above ground. It's a good 8 feet off the ground for the first floor. That's going to be 8 feet, and then that'll either be a parapet or potentially another floor, but at least a parapet. So that's going to be his little hideaway for writing and such. But anyway, I haven't changed from working out back, and so I'm all shaggy and pardon the unprofessional appearance. But anyway, I hope you enjoy the content I have discussed here, and thank you everybody for all your comments and feedback. It's really been helpful, and I hope it's helping everybody else out too. As per multiple requests, I am continuing to provide updates on the Tomb of Horrors adventure, and also many thanks to the specific comments that you guys have made on the channel. I really appreciate that. Regarding the game room video and the collection series, I've been going through and showing you all the books laid out, slowly panning across with some music, and it's been bringing back memories for people of all the previous years, many years, spanning decades of gaming material. I'm glad it triggered fond memories. I have a lot more of that coming soon with many other role-playing game systems. So far I started out with just D&D, original, basic, expert, companion, 1st edition, 2nd edition, through 3rd edition so far, and then there'll be a little snippet for 4th and 5th edition. But there's much more on the way with MERP, Middle-earth Role-Playing, Rolemaster, Twilight 2000, Paranoia, a whole slew more. If you see the video of the game room, you'll see the books just stacked, but you only see the occasional spine since a lot of the modules don't have spines. So expect to see a lot more of those coming out in coming weeks or months, whatever the schedule allows. Though there is, as I said before, a lot of crossover between this, the Tomb of Horror using 5th edition series, and the 5th edition review series, I am going to try to focus on the differences that 5th edition is making to this specific adventure, rather than gaming in D&D as a whole. So I'm saving responses to the 5th edition review series to be responded to directly in the upcoming segments for that series, rather than here. One little comment for this series from Wolf Puppy Dog, stated 11 hours ago when I looked it up. Very interesting take on a classic. More musing in future episodes would be great. He or she states that I had my own house rules on character versus player for some very rare cases. For example, I had a player tell me if he's going to search a 100-foot by 100-foot room inch by inch, then I might let them roll against an ability, not to find something, but whether they have the patience to carry out something so tedious. Perhaps these are part of the official rules, but I haven't played for quite a number of years, so I don't remember. I'm not aware of that being it exactly, but that's certainly an interesting take on it. I like your take on that. Regarding uploading a 4-hour session would be too much. I think having a 5 to 10 minute snippet would be nice. What he's referring to is I've been actually recording these gaming sessions, as I have for a lot of my groups now. Everybody's given permission and been fine, and realizes that they may end up on the channel and such, although it's mostly just for my observational development of ideas for later on more controlled studies related to the therapeutic and educational use of role-playing games for specific interventions and specific populations. But I'm gaming with a lot of non-special needs groups and making lots of observations and notes in a non-formal way, and everybody's been fine with that. Meanwhile, some people have liked to watch these games and see how they played out. But I'm not going to upload the full 4-hour sessions, 4 to 5 hour sessions for each game session. However, editing it down to 5, 10, 15 minutes is many more hours. So if I can find the time, I'll try to edit some of these down, at least just try to skim through and find some great highlights. But I can't promise that. It's a lot of work to edit all that down. And as much as I'd love to do it, I wish it wasn't all me. If I had a crew and everything, I could hand it off and say, go find good pieces, and we can do it from there. But I'm juggling a lot of plates. But I appreciate that the interest is there, and if I can make the time, I will. Oh, and I did do the same thing. I did the same thing for the One Ring role-playing game on previous years. That's the latest licensed Tolkien-based role-playing game by Cubicle 7 and Sophisticated Games by Francesco Nepatello. Great game, by the way. Really enjoyed it. I've reviewed about it extensively. We now have it regularly at our Tolkien Moot conventions each year. And those sessions are up there, raw and unedited, and because we were trying to figure out the rules and kind of stumbling along, because unfortunately the layout of the book wasn't the greatest. As great as setting and the rules overall are, the layout wasn't very good. And they've been trying to refine that. There's a new version coming out that hopefully will address a lot of that. Up there on the Tolkien Moot channel, I believe. So youtube.com/Tolkien Moot. Not directly part of RPG Research, but it's all part of my many projects. So, first edition Tomb of Horrors with 5th edition players. All the PCs are 12th level. I'm not sure I stated that before. Most are using the exact basic template from the roster of 20 characters from the actual module, and then modified by the 5th edition rules. Now, again, some of them, because they're multi-classing and they were 4th and 7th and things like that, they're not identical, but I took the same attributes, so strength, intelligence, wisdom, dexterity, constitution, charisma, and also I throw in comeliness, because I like that. I've talked about that before. And the same magical equipment, so the same magic items. They're generally not going to get much more. They might get an extra potion or scroll if they were a little light on something, but basically the same equipment, the same races and classes that were in that original roster 1st edition. But then applying the 5th edition racial modifications, backgrounds, class modifiers for being 12th level. So trying to keep it a fairly close comparison using that same roster. That gives you some idea. I don't know if I detailed that in the previous sessions. Before I get into the specific sessions, some ongoing impressions of 5th edition, just a short version here. I think I go on for hours about it, but I'll keep that for the long reviews. So, as I've said before, I really like the improved emphasis of non-numerical character backgrounds, story background, motivation, etc. Even though it's not really critical for this Tomb of Horrors adventure, in overall gaming, that's good. And it does let the players interact a little differently, even in the context of Tomb of Horrors, which is more of a puzzle-solving adventure. The initial point inflation of races and classes for 5th edition is on par with a mix between 3rd and 4th edition. So it's more than 3rd edition, not quite as much as 4th edition in some areas. However, unfortunately, the more we play the actual system, so there's the character generation, then there's the playing actual rules, the more the game feels like it's trying to placate short attention span, high stimulus video gamers. Sorry, but that's how it's coming across. And, for example, for crying out loud, the characters effectively regenerate all wounds with just a long rest, and I think that's just ridiculous. And as I mentioned before, also spellcasters, due to extremely excessive cantrip inflation, are now immensely more powerful than before. I can't say if they're more powerful at high level overall with other spells. Those higher spells that are higher level are roughly the same, though those higher level spells are available a little easier, some of them between 1 to 3 levels earlier than they were, let's say, in 1st edition. So, for example, if the spell is available in 1st edition at 7th level, it's now available as a 5th level spell. So they get it sooner, and they might not even have gotten it 12th level before, and now they get it. So that's just giving, again, that comparison of using the same roster, but then 5th edition rules kind of gives a comparison of the inflation. But also remember, this is to 1st edition. I'm not really making a comparison between 3rd and 4th edition. So when I say inflation from 1st edition, realize that 3rd and 2nd edition was significantly inflated. 1st edition was significantly inflated over the original first 3 booklets for D&D, where it was all D6s and you didn't have different 6-sided dice. So even 1st edition set a bar of inflation going forward, or at least the add-on books to original did. But as I feared, the combat-oriented cantrips are severely unbalancing and not really encouraging the players to be more creative in their solutions as cantrips did back in the earlier days. While the cantrips in 1st edition were stimuli for creativity, the 5th edition approach is more the approach of using a hammer for everything, and it is not encouraging creative solutions Hands down, that's just what I'm observing, and it's not surprising. I am still ambivalent about combat itself. I've never really liked the D20 combat system's lack of detail. I much preferred MERP and Rollmaster and others, despite some of their own shortcomings. Especially have enjoyed detailed hit locations and specific wounds, you know, bleeding 1 hit point per round, stunned for two rounds, you know, -2 to activity or -10 in MERP terms for percentage base. Really, really enjoyed that. It made the system kind of deadly, but you could modify that, and of course it worked both directions. Now, on the bright side, just a couple days ago, as I was going through doing these videos of my collections, I stumbled across a GM screen that included the rules for the player options. This is Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd Edition, Player Options, Combat and Tactics Rulebook. That's for 2nd Edition, detailing critical hit locations. And I'm really enjoying what I'm seeing so far within the context of D20. So I've written up an adaptation to 3rd Edition, using those rules, but tweaking it to fit 3rd Edition better. And I'll probably do the same for 5th Edition. If you are interested in knowing what I did with these rules, let me know and I'll post those variant rules if you'd like, and happily discuss it in a separate segment. So far, just some house rules that for 5th edition I will likely implement in my groups when this adventure is over. I'm not changing the rules in the middle of this adventure, but as I start to do more pure 5th edition adventures for my groups, for my particular playing style, keeping that in mind, each game master and each player has their own preferences in game style, so for my style, there are at least 3 house rules I'm pretty sure I'm going to do because they keep coming up with every session, and I've been running 5th edition now since early mid-June 2014. Long rest will only recuperate hit points equal to your level plus con bonus. That still feels hugely inflated from the old days of just 1 to 2 hit points per night's rest, but in line with some of the inflation of 5th edition, but without the ridiculous video game reset of a long rest basically regenerating all hit points. I'm kind of trying to balance that. We'll see how that goes. Number 2, the cantrips list will almost certainly be completely overhauled. I will move all those combat spells back to 1st level where they belong, as well as any other overpowering cantrips, and put the old 1st edition cantrips in their place. So they still have a lot of choices. Then they can use those to continue with all the freedom to implement in creative ways. Creative solutions rather than hitting with a big hammer or baseball bat or whatever, which is what these overpowered cantrips are doing. Number 3, modification of the combat system to include hit location rules, as I mentioned earlier. Now that's very much a personal preference. That is not anything more or less broken than previous versions of D20. D20 has consistently lacked hit location and crits. Gygax railed against criticals in the earliest original books, and there's lots of people who are for the very vague D20. So even when I don't use specific combat detail rules, I still encourage players, and I do so as a GM, to specify, come slash it across here and slash it across there, and hit its arm, and give some level of detail rather than just roll, he loses 6 hit points. Okay. 9 damage. Okay, how many hit points do you have left? 13. Okay, well, you took 6 more. That seems really boring. And for some people it seems fine, but in my groups we like to have a little bit more visualization of the specific actions and have fun, and it'd be nice if the rules supported that without slowing down too much. Rollmaster implements a lot, but it's a little random about the hit location, but it is very entertaining in its graphicness. And anytime I've introduced players who are ready for that level of complexity, they very much enjoyed that part, but again, the speed can be an issue. So we'll see how adding these 2nd edition rules tweaked and simplified, so I'm making it so you don't have to roll multiple times. So the 2nd edition rules, the way they're formatted, you have to roll multiple times to get the final result. Well, that slows things down, and I'm basing it on some quick calculations that hopefully will work. We'll see how that works out over time. Again, I should make a separate video on that. There's likely to be more house rules than just these 3 issues, but these are the 3 that have come up with every 5th edition session I've run so far. A little bit more background, since some people have been asking. As a reminder, back in the 80s, I ran 3 groups through this adventure using 1st edition AD&D. The group I'm currently running, I ran them through A0, a prequel to Against the Slave Lords A1 through 4. They were at 1st level using original D&D. in the reprinted box set, using all 7 books rather than just the initial 3 books, so that you get the variance and hit dice, and it's basically what would later be organized and lead to the first edition AD&D. The prior 3 groups using AD&D first edition back in the 80s generally quickly adapted to the deeper puzzle solving and thinking aspect of Tomb of Horrors, rather than trying to brute force their way through. There are always individual players that didn't get it and basically got squashed. Generally, the group as a whole would figure it out, and usually those players, as they took over a different character, went, oh, maybe I need to think this out a little bit more. And I noted that this particular group that's now in Tomb of Horrors using 5th edition, we were previously playing OD&D, original D&D. They were generally very careful to avoid combat, even though it wasn't any more deadly, it was pretty simple and straightforward. They really did a lot more thinking with the A0 adventure, and generally avoided much combat. They had combat, but that wasn't always their first inclination. However, this same group, there's a couple people have changed, but it's basically the same group. Now using 5th edition, they seem to be much more inclined to use magic and brute force rather than creative solutions. They haven't been terrible about it, but the 5th edition rules have just made it that much easier for them to skip thinking the puzzles out in more subtle ways, and instead they're blundering their way through in a more brute force approach using a lot more magic than all prior groups combined. Already, and they're already just in they've only gotten their first combat situation, and so there's a significant, this is the consequence when you make magic easily available, it's allowed, they're going to use it, and this is a consequence, and I think again, this falls into the video game high stimulus thing. It's like, oh, cool, explosions, etc., but they're not really thinking things out the way they used to.